New tariffs today as trade wars with some of our closest trading allies continue to escalate.
A blanket tariff of 25% on steel and aluminium imports to the US has come into effect for all of America's trading partners with no exceptions or exemptions.
The trade war just escalated, and this time, the European Union has fired back. In a move that sent shockwaves through global markets, the EU has announced sweeping retaliatory measures aimed directly at one of America's most vital industries, automobiles. For years, US automakers have relied on European exports, cutting-edge parts and key supply chains to keep production running, but that could all be about to change. With new tariffs, supply restrictions, and strategic partnerships with America's biggest competitors, the EU is striking at the heart of US manufacturing. But this isn't just about tariffs. It's a calculated power play that could reshape the future of the auto industry. So what's really going on? What does this mean for the future of American-made cars? And how will Washington respond? Let's break it all down. Trade war erupts. The United States and European Union face off over auto tariffs. The global economy has just been thrown into turmoil, and this time, it is not a conflict between China and the United States making headlines. It is a full-blown trade war between the United States and the European Union. In a bold and unprecedented move, the European Union has announced sweeping retaliatory measures aimed squarely at the American automotive industry. This aggressive response comes on the heels of newly elected President Donald Trump's controversial decision to impose steep tariffs on European car imports. The announcement has sent shockwaves through global trade corridors, threatening to upend supply chains, drive up consumer prices, and fuel an economic standoff between two of the world's largest economies. But was this move by the United States truly about fair trade? Or is it part of a broader political strategy that could reshape global economic alliances? Trump's gamble, the 25% tariff that sparked a firestorm. Since returning to the White House, President Trump has made it clear that addressing trade imbalances is a cornerstone of his economic policy. He has long argued that unfair trade practices, particularly in the automotive sector, have left American manufacturers at a competitive disadvantage. Under the current system, the United States imposes a 2.5% tariff on imported cars, while the European Union levies a 10% tariff on American vehicles entering its markets. To rectify what his administration sees as a lopsided system, President Trump announced a sweeping 25% tariff on all European automobile imports, set to take effect on April 2, 2025. This policy is part of a broader strategy of reciprocal tariffs, an aggressive approach designed to force trade partners to lower their own barriers to American products. The problem? The European Union did not back down. Europe strikes back, a trade war in the making. Within hours of Trump's announcement, the European Union made it clear that it would not accept the new tariffs without retaliating. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen responded with a sharp warning, stating that the EU would act immediately and decisively if the United States went through with the proposed tariffs. And act they did. The EU unveiled a series of countermeasures aimed at directly punishing the American automotive sector. In an almost mirror-image response, Brussels announced its own 25% tariff on all American-made vehicles and automotive parts exported to Europe. However, the retaliation did not stop there. The EU also extended its countermeasures to other key industries, including agriculture and technology, signaling a broader economic war. The consequences of this trade escalation will be far-reaching, affecting industries and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. For American automakers, the European market represents a critical revenue stream, with exports totaling €56 billion in 2023. The sudden imposition of high tariffs on American vehicles could make them significantly less competitive in Europe, leading to sharp declines in sales. For manufacturers that specialize in larger vehicles, such as sports utility vehicles and trucks, already struggling to gain traction in the European market due to size constraints and fuel costs, the new tariffs could be devastating. Companies like Ford and General Motors may be forced to absorb massive financial losses or shift production outside of the United States to circumvent the tariffs. However, the fallout will not be limited to the auto sector. The European Union's retaliatory tariffs on American agricultural products could deal a severe blow to farmers, who already face volatile international markets. Increased tariffs on crops, dairy, and livestock products could make American goods too expensive for European buyers, leading to a sharp decline in demand. Farmers, who played a crucial role in Trump's re-election, may find themselves bearing the brunt of this trade war. Many still remember the heavy losses suffered during Trump's first term when China imposed tariffs on American soybeans and pork, causing billions in lost revenue for the agricultural industry. The EU's latest move could further deepen the financial strain on rural America. Beyond the economic damage, the tariffs threaten to undermine one of the world's most important political alliances. The United States and the European Union have long collaborated on issues ranging from security and counterterrorism to climate change and trade. However, the escalating trade dispute risks fracturing this relationship, pushing the EU to seek new economic partnerships elsewhere. One major concern is that European leaders may pivot toward China, strengthening their trade ties with Beijing in an effort to counterbalance Trump's America First agenda. In recent years, China has aggressively courted European nations, signing major trade deals and investing billions into European infrastructure. A prolonged trade conflict with the United States could accelerate this shift, leaving Washington increasingly isolated. Additionally, the ripple effects of the tariffs could encourage other nations to impose their own protectionist measures. Countries such as Japan, Canada, and South Korea, all major players in global trade, may rethink their economic relationships with the United States if they believe they could be the next target of Trump's aggressive policies. Diplomatic efforts. Can the crisis be averted? Despite the hardline stance taken by both Washington and Brussels, diplomatic efforts are already underway to prevent a full-scale economic war. EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic has called for immediate discussions with US officials, emphasizing that a mutually beneficial trade agreement is still possible. However, both sides remain deeply entrenched in their positions, with the United States demanding more favorable trade terms and the European Union unwilling to capitulate. Industry leaders are also urging restraint. Major automotive manufacturers and agricultural exporters on both sides of the Atlantic have warned that prolonged tariffs could result in job losses, reduced investment, and economic stagnation. Many companies are lobbying their respective governments to reach a compromise before the tariffs take effect. As the deadline for the tariffs approaches, the stakes could not be higher. If neither side backs down, the world could witness one of the most consequential trade wars in modern history. With global supply chains already struggling to recover from pandemic-era disruptions and geopolitical conflicts, a full-blown US-EU trade war could send shockwaves through international markets. For President Trump, this battle represents a defining moment in his second term. His supporters view the tariffs as a necessary stand against unfair trade practices, a bold move to protect American jobs and industries. His critics, however, warn that this strategy could backfire spectacularly, leading to economic instability and diminished global influence. For the European Union, the challenge is equally daunting. Brussels must balance its desire to maintain free trade principles with the necessity of protecting its industries from what it sees as an unjustified attack. If the EU concedes too much, it risks appearing weak. If it escalates further, it risks plunging Europe into an economic downturn. The battle lines have been drawn, and the war over automotive tariffs is escalating faster than anyone predicted. What started as a move by President Trump to level the playing field has now triggered a full-scale economic showdown between the United States and the European Union. With both sides refusing to back down, the consequences are unfolding in real time, sending shockwaves through global markets. But here is the real question: who is actually winning this fight? And more importantly, who will be left standing when the dust settles? the US takes a risk, and the EU hits back hard. When President Trump announced a 25% tariff on European car imports, he painted the move as a victory for American automakers. His administration argued that European manufacturers had unfairly benefited from lower import tariffs while flooding the US market with their vehicles. The goal? To force the EU to lower its own barriers and create a more reciprocal trade relationship. But Brussels was not about to play defense. Within hours of Trump's announcement, European leaders unveiled their own countermeasure, slapping a 25% tariff on all American-made vehicles and auto parts. This tit-for-tat escalation now puts American manufacturers in a precarious position, especially companies like Ford, General Motors and Tesla, which rely heavily on European markets. And here is where things get even worse. The EU did not just target the auto industry, they expanded their tariffs to hit two of the most crucial sectors of the American economy, agriculture and technology. This move is more than just economic retaliation. It is a direct attack on key industries that fuel the US economy and President Trump's political base. So now the question is, can American businesses survive this economic crossfire? The real cost of this trade war, and it is not just about cars. For American automakers, this fight is personal. The European market represents billions of dollars in revenue each year, and now those profits are in jeopardy. The biggest problem? The supply chain. American car manufacturers depend on European parts. High-precision German transmissions, cutting-edge electronics from France and Italy, and specialty steel used in chassis production. The new tariffs mean that these crucial parts will now cost significantly more, forcing automakers to either absorb the cost or pass it on to consumers. The result? Higher prices for American cars, reduced sales, and a shrinking competitive edge against Japanese and Korean rivals who are not affected by the tariffs. And let's not forget about American farmers. The European Union is one of the largest buyers of American agricultural products. Soybeans, corn, beef, and dairy products have long been major US exports to Europe. But with these new tariffs, European buyers are already shifting to alternative sources like Brazil and Argentina. For struggling American farmers, this is déjà vu. They remember what happened in 2018 when China slapped tariffs on US soybeans during the first Trump trade war. Prices collapsed, farms went bankrupt, and rural communities suffered. Now, history is repeating itself, and this time, the pain could last even longer. Will Trump's base stick with him? If their livelihoods are on the line, the European Union is not just playing defense, it is strategically leveraging its economic alliances to counteract the US tariffs. Reports indicate that EU leaders are in talks with China to strengthen trade ties, a move that could create a powerful new economic alliance. If Europe redirects its car exports to China instead of the US, it would deal a severe blow to American automakers. Even worse, European automakers like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagen have already started shifting production to Mexico, where they can bypass US tariffs altogether thanks to trade agreements under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. This means Trump's tariffs might not even achieve their intended goal. European car makers will still sell in the US, just from different locations. Tech giants in trouble. How the trade war just got personal. When the European Union decided to expand its tariffs beyond cars and agriculture, it was a calculated attack on Silicon Valley. Companies like Apple, Tesla, and major software firms rely heavily on Europe, not just for sales, but for collaboration in AI development, green technology, and research partnerships. With new EU restrictions on American tech firms, US companies could lose billions in revenue and face even stricter regulations on European soil. And let's talk about something that has not made headlines yet: the brain drain. If the trade war escalates further, top-tier engineers and tech experts may start leaving the United States for countries with more stable economic policies. Europe, China, and even Canada could see an influx of American talent looking for greener pastures, a trend that could cripple innovation in the US for decades to come. Right now, both Washington and Brussels are refusing to back down. President Trump has made it clear that he sees the tariffs as a necessary battle to restore economic fairness, while the EU insists that it will not be bullied into submission. But with the April souk 2025 deadline fast approaching, businesses are scrambling to adjust. Some US automakers are already considering shifting production to Mexico or Canada to avoid the tariffs, but such a move could backfire politically, as Trump has built his campaign on bringing jobs back to America. And there is another danger that no one is talking about: retaliation from other global players. If Japan, South Korea, or Canada decide to take sides in this fight, we could see a full-scale global trade war unfold, dragging down economies worldwide. The impact on consumers: higher prices, fewer options. For American car buyers, the effects of these tariffs will soon become painfully apparent. The cost of both imported European vehicles and domestically manufactured cars that rely on European parts is set to rise sharply. In an already inflated market, where supply chain shortages and increased production costs have made new cars more expensive than ever, these tariffs are another heavy burden on consumers. The affordability crisis in the auto market, exacerbated by post-pandemic inflation, is set to worsen. Many buyers who were considering purchasing a new vehicle may now be forced to look at pre-owned cars instead, which will, in turn, drive up demand and pricing in the used car market. Dealerships, already navigating an uncertain economic landscape, will have to reconsider their inventory strategies. Some may reduce their stock of European models, while others may pivot toward alternative brands that are less impacted by tariffs. Additionally, American consumers could begin looking beyond traditional markets for vehicles. With European imports becoming prohibitively expensive, car buyers might start considering Japanese, South Korean, or even Chinese manufacturers, which could benefit significantly from this trade war. If this shift becomes permanent, European automakers may find it increasingly difficult to regain their foothold in the US market, even if tariffs are eventually lifted. Collateral damage: how other sectors are getting pulled into the trade war. While the automotive sector is at the forefront of this economic standoff, other industries are beginning to feel the ripple effects. The EU's countermeasures have deliberately targeted key US exports beyond cars, including agricultural products and technology, industries that play a crucial role in the American economy. For American farmers, the timing of these tariffs could not be worse. The agricultural sector, already struggling with market instability, climate unpredictability, and fluctuating global demand, now faces new trade barriers that threaten to reduce European demand for US soybeans, corn, and beef. The Midwest, often referred to as America's breadbasket, could see economic strain as export revenues decline. Entire farming communities that rely on steady trade with European partners may experience severe financial difficulties. The technology sector is also caught in the crossfire. Companies like Apple, Tesla, and other major software firms rely on Europe not just for sales, but also for key research collaborations. A deteriorating trade relationship with the EU could hinder joint research projects in artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and green technology, industries that are vital for future economic growth. If these tensions escalate, American tech firms may find themselves facing new regulatory roadblocks, restricted market access, and increased competition from European firms that seek to capitalize on the growing rift. Wall Street's response: market volatility and investor panic. The uncertainty surrounding these tariffs is already manifesting in fluctuating stock prices and growing investor anxiety. The automotive sector has long been considered a bellwether for broader economic trends, and its current instability is sending distress signals across global markets. Share prices of major automakers have swung wildly as analysts struggle to predict the long-term fallout of these tariffs. European and American stock exchanges have experienced increased volatility, with fears that prolonged trade disputes could lead to broader economic downturns. Some financial experts are already warning that if this trade war continues unabated, both the US and the EU could face significant recessions. As the standoff drags on, investors will likely continue to pull back from industries directly impacted by these tariffs, opting instead for more stable investment opportunities. European auto stocks have not fared much better. The uncertainty surrounding US trade policies has led to increased market instability, with some investors questioning whether European manufacturers should shift their focus toward non-US markets to avoid prolonged financial risks. Even beyond the auto industry, broader financial markets are beginning to feel the ripple effects. The fear of a prolonged economic downturn has led some analysts to predict a tightening of credit markets, which could make it more difficult for businesses of all sizes to secure financing for expansion and investment. Additionally, central banks on both sides of the Atlantic may be forced to reconsider their monetary policies to prevent a potential recession. If economic conditions continue to deteriorate, the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank may be compelled to implement new strategies to stabilize the financial system. Europe's strategic countermove, strengthening economic alliances with China. While the European Union's initial response to Trump's tariffs was direct retaliation, EU leaders are also looking beyond the immediate battle to secure long-term stability, recognizing that continued dependence on American trade may put them in a vulnerable position. European nations are actively exploring ways to deepen their economic ties with China. Over the past decade, Europe and China have already collaborated on key industries such as green energy, high-tech manufacturing, and infrastructure projects. Now, with the United States embracing protectionism, the incentive to strengthen these partnerships has never been greater. A deeper EU-China trade alliance could have profound geopolitical consequences. If Europe shifts more of its trade and investment toward China while reducing its reliance on the US, Washington may find itself increasingly isolated in global economic negotiations. American automakers, which have long relied on European markets to maintain profitability, could face the dual challenge of higher tariffs in Europe and increased competition from Chinese brands filling the void. This would further strain US manufacturers, already dealing with the high costs of tariffs and supply chain disruptions. The unseen casualties, small businesses and auto repair shops. While much of the focus has been on major automakers, the impact of the trade war extends to smaller businesses that rely on a steady supply of European-made components. Independent auto repair shops, specialty parts suppliers, and custom car modification businesses are facing an unexpected crisis as the cost of European parts skyrockets. Many auto shops specialize in servicing German luxury brands like BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz. But if these vehicles become too expensive to maintain, car owners may decide to sell them rather than pay the increased costs of repairs. For small businesses that rely on selling and installing European car parts, this could mean a sharp decline in revenue. Customers who typically invest in high-end modifications and performance upgrades may begin to reconsider their spending, leading to layoffs in niche markets that have long been sustained by the European automotive industry. These businesses do not have the financial flexibility of major automakers and are more vulnerable to sudden economic shifts, making them among the hardest-hit casualties of this trade war. The human cost, job losses in American manufacturing. The most immediate concern for the US economy is the potential for significant job losses in the automotive sector. The American auto industry employs over 1 million people across manufacturing, engineering, sales, and service roles. If production slows due to the rising cost of European components and reduced demand for vehicles affected by tariffs, layoffs may become inevitable. Factories that produce cars for export to Europe will likely be the first to suffer. Companies like Ford and General Motors distributors, which have historically relied on European sales to maintain profitability, could be forced to scale back operations if demand drops sharply. The effects will not be limited to factory workers. Jobs across the supply chain, from steel workers producing auto-grade metal to logistics workers handling transportation, will also be at risk. Automotive labor unions have already voiced their concerns, warning that the trade war could trigger widespread economic instability within the industry. If layoffs and plant closures become widespread, unions may begin organizing strikes or labor protests, adding further strain to an already volatile economic situation. This could create additional pressure on the government to either negotiate a resolution or provide financial relief to affected workers. The energy sector, a strategic shift away from US LNG. The energy sector, particularly liquefied natural gas (LNG) exports, is now facing major uncertainty due to the trade dispute. The United States has rapidly become one of the world's largest exporters of LNG, with Europe emerging as a key buyer, especially in the wake of geopolitical tensions with Russia. European nations have made significant strides in reducing their reliance on Russian gas, turning instead to US suppliers for a stable energy source. However, with economic tensions between Washington and Brussels escalating, European leaders may be forced to reconsider their long-term energy procurement strategies. If the trade war continues, European energy companies could pivot away from US LNG imports and instead explore alternative suppliers such as Qatar, Australia, and Norway. Additionally, European governments may accelerate their investments in renewable energy sources like wind and solar power to reduce dependency on American fossil fuels altogether. This shift would deal a serious blow to US energy firms, many of which have invested billions of dollars into infrastructure projects, such as LNG export terminals along the Gulf Coast, with the expectation of long-term European demand. Beyond simple tariffs, the European Union could take further retaliatory measures in the form of stricter environmental regulations targeting American fossil fuels, new carbon taxation policies, sustainability benchmarks, and renewable energy incentives could make it more difficult for US energy exporters to compete in European markets. Such policy changes would not only impact the energy industry, but could also have broader implications for transatlantic trade relations in sectors beyond fossil fuels. Technology sector faces a new Cold War in trade relations. Beyond energy and automotive industries, another sector facing mounting uncertainty is technology. The US and the EU have traditionally collaborated on innovation in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and semiconductor development, but this trade conflict could weaken that relationship. One of the most immediate concerns is the impact on the semiconductor supply chain. The global chip industry is highly interconnected, with the US leading in design, Europe specializing in manufacturing equipment, and Asia handling large-scale production. If the trade war escalates further, semiconductor manufacturers may find themselves restricted in accessing vital components due to new trade barriers. European tech firms, such as ASML, which produces some of the most advanced lithography machines used in semiconductor fabrication, may face new regulatory challenges in selling equipment to American companies. If EU leaders impose stricter trade policies in retaliation, American semiconductor giants like Intel, Nvidia, and Qualcomm could find themselves struggling to access key European markets. Furthermore, increased trade tensions could give European regulators greater motivation to implement new data privacy laws and antitrust measures that make it harder for US tech firms to operate in Europe. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Google, which already face scrutiny from European regulators, could see additional restrictions imposed on their operations, further complicating their global strategies. The fragmentation of global technology cooperation would not only slow down innovation, but also increase the cost of products for consumers. Disruptions in semiconductor supply chains could delay advancements in 5G technology, quantum computing, and even space exploration, highlighting how far-reaching the impact of this trade war could be. A new era of foreign direct investment in automotive manufacturing. As tariffs reshape traditional trade patterns, automakers on both sides of the Atlantic are reassessing their production strategies to maintain profitability. One of the most significant trends emerging from this conflict is the acceleration of foreign direct investment, FDI, in local manufacturing facilities. European automakers that have historically relied on exporting vehicles to the US are now exploring the expansion of their North American production footprint to sidestep tariffs. German manufacturers such as BMW and Volkswagen already operate plants in South Carolina and Tennessee, respectively, and they may now increase their production capacity in these facilities to avoid the financial burden of new tariffs. Similarly, Italian automaker Stellantis, which owns Chrysler, Jeep and Fiat, could prioritize domestic manufacturing within North America rather than exporting vehicles from Europe. On the other hand, American automakers looking to maintain access to European markets may consider relocating production to EU member states. However, higher labor costs, stringent regulatory requirements, and complex environmental policies make this option less attractive. Instead, some American manufacturers might look to Eastern European nations, or Turkey, as potential production hubs, allowing them to access European markets without being directly impacted by the tariffs imposed by Brussels. If European automakers significantly expand their US production, it could lead to job growth in American states with existing automotive infrastructure. However, this shift may also result in job losses across Europe as production facilities relocate. This potential loss of manufacturing jobs in European countries could create political and economic challenges for EU leaders, increasing pressure to negotiate a resolution before long-term damage is done. China, the unexpected winner in the US-EU trade war. While the US and EU continue their trade dispute, one major player is watching closely: China. The growing tensions between Washington and Brussels have created an opening for China to expand its influence in both markets, particularly in the automotive sector. China has long sought to establish itself as a dominant player in the global electric vehicle (EV) market. Companies like BYD and NIO have aggressively expanded their international presence, and the fractures developing between the US and Europe present an opportunity for these brands to gain a foothold. If European automakers face declining sales in the US and higher production costs due to tariffs, China could step in to fill the gap with competitively priced EVs. Similarly, if American automakers lose access to European markets, Chinese manufacturers could strengthen their position by offering vehicles that meet European environmental and performance standards. Beyond automobiles, China may also seek to strengthen economic ties with the EU in response to US protectionist policies. Trade agreements between China and Europe could include increased cooperation in high-tech industries, renewable energy projects, and infrastructure investments. A more aligned China-EU economic relationship would further isolate the United States, making it more difficult for American companies to regain lost market share once the trade war ends. The future of the trade war. Will diplomacy prevail? While both the US and the EU remain entrenched in their positions, diplomatic efforts are still underway behind the scenes to find a resolution. Trade representatives from both sides are exploring potential compromises to prevent further economic damage. One potential outcome is a phased tariff rollback, where both sides agree to gradually reduce tariffs while negotiating a broader trade agreement. Another possible resolution involves sector-specific exemptions, allowing certain industries or products to receive temporary relief while broader negotiations continue. Regardless of the final outcome, the coming months will be crucial in determining whether this trade war evolves into a protracted economic conflict or if a new trade agreement can be forged that benefits both parties. Millions of workers, businesses, and consumers are anxiously awaiting the resolution of this conflict, making it one of the most pivotal economic showdowns of the 21st century. As global markets brace for impact, one question remains: will cooler heads prevail, or will the US-EU trade war spiral into an all-out economic battle with no clear winner? Alright, so that's it for this video, and if you want to watch more amazing content like this, check out some of our other videos. Bye!